Good morning, and welcome to not Ted Patterson, as originally advertised in this slot. I'm not Ted Patterson, as you can tell by the accent. My name is Dave McMahon, and I'm here to talk about Visio Services in SharePoint 2010. So this is a bit about me. I work for a company called Rigian. We are a Microsoft Gold partner, and we're based in right in central Birmingham by the NIA, in fact. My official title is Software Systems Architect. I do a bit of everything. I've been a network admin and a developer and so on and so on. That's our URL, and that's my email if you want to talk to us about anything you hear in this session today. I'm also one of the co-founders of the UK's Next Generation User Group. We have 7 regions around the country, so if you like what you hear today and you like other technology as well as SharePoint, then check us out on that URL. We're in 7 different towns around the country, hopefully near you. And my blog is that URL there. And for my sins, I'm also a SharePoint MVP. Treat that with whatever you want to treat that with. Okay, so our agenda for today is very straightforward. We're going to be looking at data visualization, a little bit of what we call Visio Services in action. So we're actually going to start with the demos today. A little bit how Visio Services work, and then some on the developing with Visio Services. So first off, though, really, what are we talking about? Why the need for data visualization? So it's fairly straightforward and fairly simple, I'm sure you realise. But as an example, okay, I want you from the next slide. I would like you to tell me which you think is the best user group in the UK. Okay, so looking at the figures, determine what they are. Okay, do you see that? And we've all worked it out? No? Okay, we'll have another go. And now tell me. Okay, it's very straightforward, isn't it, really? I mean, it just doesn't need rocket science. A picture paints 1,000 words. You put your data into pictures, and it instantly has an impact which figures just cannot do. The eye is very sensitive to colours, changes in colour, changes in shape. It's not very good at necessarily reading words very quickly and figures and so on. So, and today we've got information from all sorts of different sources. We have information from, obviously blogs, the internet, documents in our company, people send us text, all manner of information, all coming from all different sites, places and so on. And we've also had in the past business diagramming. Who amongst us has not enjoyed drawing a Visio diagram of our server network or our website map or something like that? We've all done it, I'm sure. Probably our biggest interaction with Visio has been drawing that server diagram for our new application or our server diagram for our network. But it tells a picture, doesn't it? It paints a picture. And here with SharePoint 2010, one of the things I'm really excited about, and I actually saw this first time when I was lucky enough to go to Vegas to the SharePoint conference last year, and I just sort of popped into the Visio Services session because I thought, well, that's a little bit different, and I was actually stunned by what I saw. I thought, this is absolutely awesome. Okay, the possibilities of what you can do now with this particular aspect of SharePoint is really, really exciting, and it's very simple to use. But we're talking about Visio 2010, so as I said, we've all had experiences probably of working with Visio. What a lot of people may not know is that in Visio 2007, you had the ability to data bind your diagrams. So you could actually take your data and you could bind it to your shapes in your Visio diagram. And it was 2010, that's been continued, and you've got that capability, and the capability has now been extended such you can actually deploy your diagrams to the web using Visio Services 2010 and actually share your information in your diagram, whether they have Visio or not. You have to have Visio 2010 in order to build the diagrams for Visio Services, but you don't have to have Visio installed on your client in order to see them. Okay, so that is a very powerful aspect of this facility in 2010. So I think, without further ado, we'll actually take a look at Visio Services in action. Because, as I say, a picture paints 1,000 words, and I think we should actually really look at that. So we're going to go straight into a demo. Now, just for a bit of background, my machine here is running 2 VMs at the moment. So, give it a little bit of sympathy every now and again. I'm sure we'll get there. But I'm actually running it, unfortunately, with the release candidate, you have to have a domain controller and another machine in actual to run SharePoint on. So I've actually got 2 VMs running on here, one on my actual hard disk and one on a little drive on the side. So fingers crossed it will all be okay. But here we have Visio Services for start off. Okay, so this is a Visio Services diagram. And I like Visio because there's lots of stuff you can do with it. I'm not in any way experienced Visio in probably any more than anybody in the room. I've done the server diagrams, I've done the website, I've done the organisational charts, and that's probably about it. I'm not an MVP or a guru in Visio. There's many more people in the room more experienced than I am using it. But I managed to whittle together that little Visio diagram. And the exciting thing about that is it's actually in Silverlight. Okay, it's rendered in Silverlight, and it's as we'll see as we go along, it's fully vectorized, it's scalable, pannable, zoomable, all sorts of things you can. And that data in there. This particular diagram hasn't got any data binding on it. It's just a simple data diagram, but it does have hyperlinks in it. And to be honest, that's just using Visio. I could probably not write that in Silverlight. Okay, anyone could actually design that in Silverlight using Blend or something like that. I couldn't probably do that, but I certainly can do that in Visio and put it up there on the web. No problem at all. Okay, so let's have a look. I can connect to other diagrams via hyperlinks on my Visio diagram there. And oh yes, we've got to have the server diagram. If you go to Visio, you have to have the server diagram, I'm afraid. So here's the first one. But there's something a little bit different about this server diagram. In fact, it is actually data bound, and it's data bound to 2 different SQL data connections. And what I'm just going to do quickly is I've got a little program here I've called Server Pinger, all right, and it's just it's pinging real servers. Honest, it is pinging real servers, pinging my server, the server on my little drive, and it's pinging a bit on the internet as well. It's pinging a bit of Google, a bit of Bing, or whatever as well. Okay, so. But we're just aliasing them as if they're our servers on our network. Okay, so I'm going to hit start, and there we go. So I'm going to go ping, 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 ping. Okay, so we'll leave that going a bit. Now this is just this is basically a Visio Services web part, which is sitting on a normal ASPX web page in SharePoint 2010. And as we can see, we're actually got an automatic refresh on there. And I don't know if you've noticed, but on the left-hand side, right-hand side, right-hand side, okay, the lights all went green. Okay, they were red a moment ago, you might not have noticed, okay, but they were red a moment ago. They're now green because they're pinging all the servers. And you can see that some of these lights are red and some of them are green, and the reason some of them are red is because they've got a poor ping return. Okay, the ping is actually a few milliseconds, whereas the green ones is actually pinging my machine, so it's like, just like that. Okay, so that gives an indication of the ping. Now, if something happens to our network, and I can simulate a failure by typing in an F into our little thing there, and there it goes. I think that was it. Just saw it very briefly there come up. Okay, now if we wait a little bit for our diagram to refresh, I could refresh it manually, but what we'll find is after a period of time, okay, our pings will die away, and when our diagram actually refreshes, we'll find that, oh, the colours have changed. Okay, and that's actually started going a little bit pinky because indicating there's something wrong with our systems. The applications on the right-hand side are fine at the moment, so all our applications are still running, apparently. No one's noticed yet. Okay, I won't wait another minute. It's actually refreshing every minute, but I'll just refresh it again. And hopefully we'll find, oh dear, now we've got some real problems. Okay, it's going pinky pink. All right, and we notice on the right-hand side that some of the applications are also flashing red as well, indicating that maybe there's a problem there. And if we go and see what actually the problem is, well, we can flick to a different view of our data and then maybe see actually by the server locations, and we'll actually see that, in fact, yes, we do have a slight issue here, is that the main site's gone down. I think we probably would have known that by now, don't you think? All right, but, everything's switched over to the DR site. So we've actually now got a visualization in 2 different fashions of the same data, and it's there in front of us, and it's written all that's taken to do that is a little simple pinger XE, which I wrote in .NET, a Visio diagram, and Visio Services 2010, and hooking up for our data binding. Okay, so it's a real app. It's not smoke and mirrors. That is all working. The application's there on the right-hand side in our little column on the right-hand side. Depending on what servers go down, it will actually does indicate whether the system is still functioning, i.e. all the servers in that system are still functioning. So it's a working little working out. Okay, so that's one idea. I think we'd better get our server pinger going again, and I'll just actually quit out of that because it has a horrible habit of bringing the VM to its knees after a while if I keep it running all the time. Okay, because the SQL ain't that powerful on it. So if we go back to our Visio diagram, let's take a look at our Visio Central, and we'll take another look at something else. And let's take a look at, we're going to bind to Excel services this time, or an Excel spreadsheet. So we're actually going to bind our data this time to an Excel spreadsheet. And we're going to take a look at sales data. That's a common thing that you might want to demonstrate in Visio. So we've got a little hierarchical diagram here. Okay, and we've actually got on our left-hand side, we've got some data going on. Now, I haven't actually figured out, and I'll be brutally honest with you, it's time for fess up. I haven't actually figured out exactly how to get all these three parts working together. I can get two of them working together, i.e. the Visio diagram and the Excel, or both the Visios, but I can't get all three of them working together at the moment. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. There's a few timings problems with JavaScript and things like that. But basically, if I click on there, that's obviously gives me the North American sales figures, and if I click on that one there, then it refreshes and gives us the European figures, and if I click on there and do that one, it gives us the Pacific figures. Okay, and I can go back and we can see that. And these are actually data bound to an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, all the figures are in here, they all come from that spreadsheet, and if I go and change them, then the figures will change as well, depending on whether the sales is up against the quota or down, and so on. Okay? Now, you may not like my particular styling there, you may not like my particular design, but the fact of the matter is, it does paint a picture pretty straightforwardly, and it's easy to see what's going on. Okay, so that's our sales. Let's take a look at something else. How about a simple telephone directory? Okay, well, we can maybe hook our telephone directory to a floor plan and actually see where people are sitting. So I've got a simple list in our SharePoint, and we can see where Chris Squire, any Yes fans in the audience, they know who Chris Squire is. Then he sits at a desk over there, and then we've got a bit of Coldplay, and they're in the same office, and they're sitting over there. All right, so it's a simple, and that's just simple web part connections. So you're taking the name of the diagram, the name of the shape in the diagram, and you're linking it to a certain column on the list. In this case, it's just the extension, the business phone number is actually linked to the data there. So again, very, very straightforward. And finally, how about this one? Well, you can connect to SQL, you can connect to Excel, you can connect to other SharePoint lists and so on via web part connections. How about some custom data source? So what about a temperature monitoring system? Okay, so we've got here our floor plan again, slightly different. Okay, but we're actually linking here to a custom proprietary bit of kit, if you like. And all I've done here is I've written a custom data provider, and in this case it's very simple. It just links to an XML file, but it could link to a web service, it could link to some other legacy system or whatever. You could use SSIS to import some data and get it into whatever format you like. But here I've actually written a custom data provider to link in an asynchronous way to an XML file. And if I actually bring up the best text editor in the world, Notepad++, and change my data, this is the file it's getting it from. And if I heat up the main office, those keyboards have been working so hard, they've really got the office going. And if I then do a refresh on that, then we'll find actually that the temperature changes because it's reading an XML file and indicates that the temperature is too high. And then I can go back down and change it back down again. Okay, so the data has been represented in a different way, to maybe normal. But there again, a floor plan is a floor plan, it's very simple. But when you tie it to data, it becomes a whole new thing. Okay, at the SharePoint conference, I saw demonstrations of a hotel booking system done purely with Visio Services, because they had floor plans of all the hotel. Okay, they had, do you want a room by the elevator or not, or away from the elevators, because they could see which rooms were there. And they had floor plans of each of the rooms. You could click on it and link it to the floor plans of each of the room, so you could see if it had a nice jacuzzi or a pool table or something in there or whatever. Okay, so it was a very extremely powerful capabilities that we have through these diagrams. Okay, so let's head back to the slides just for a bit, and let's move on. And let's actually look a little bit at how Visio Services works and what it's actually doing and how it actually is put together. So, where does it sit in the stack? Well, it's a service application, a part of the new service applications infrastructure of SharePoint 2010. It's pretty simple to configure. There are a total of about 6 different settings that you can set to control how you want your Visio service to react. They mainly revolve around about caching, how you want to cache your diagrams. I'm not doing any caching here on my diagrams. I recommend that you do, right, because it is quite intensive what it does in terms of processing. And you need to control things like getting proper permission and authorization for your data sources and your data providers and so on. But it's all fairly similar along the same lines as Excel Services was. There's nothing rocket science about it. And a little hands up here again. I had to rebuild all these demos yesterday because I'd installed the release candidate, and when I was asked to do this session, I'd forgotten that when I said I'd do it, because I thought all my demos were all ready, but they were on the beta, and I shifted them all to the release candidate. It took me about 4 or 5 hours, but I got all 5 demos all working in about 4 or 5 hours again. So it doesn't take long to set this stuff up, and that was literally setting the whole thing up from, not SharePoint up from scratch, but setting Visio Services up from scratch and getting all the demos working. So it doesn't take long. It is very, very good and very, very efficient. Okay, so a little bit of how it works in detail and how actually the system works. So, and how you actually maybe go about getting these things working. So 3 kind of players in the system. You have the creator of the diagram, you have Visio Services itself, and you have the consumer of the diagram. We have the idea that you're going to create a diagram. You don't have to make it data bound, but to be honest, the diagrams become a whole lot more functional, a whole lot more useful. And you know what's going to happen if you deploy a diagram that isn't data bound. Your user is going to say, it'd be really nice if that server diagram changed color when the server wasn't working. Yeah? Or whatever. Or if my sales figures changed, if you could actually update it in the diagram, that would be really useful. So I'd recommend you think about binding your diagrams to data from the word go. So you build that, and it has to be Visio 2010 if you want to publish it to Visio Services. Okay? You can still do data binding, as I say, in Visio 2007, but you can't publish those diagrams to Visio Services. So, what you do, when you build your diagram, then you upload it to SharePoint 2010 as a VDW diagram. It's a new format, visual diagram for web, I suppose. I don't know, anyone's guess of what that might be, but that's what I'm guessing. And then it sits on the server, waiting for somebody to request it. And when it is requested, then the Visio Services will actually make a request to the data source to refresh the diagram, and then renders that as XAML, i.e. as Silverlight, onto your browser, and the person can actually view that diagram. So that's pretty much how it works, and very simple. And I think what we should do is really get to the meat and potatoes of the whole thing, and actually look at developing a little bit with Visio Services. We're going to look at 3 main things. We're going to be looking at how to build a data-driven diagram and deploy it to Visio Services. We'll look at how to use the JavaScript API to actually connect web parts together, like you saw in the little sales diagram where I was clicking on the thing and it was actually switching the bottom one. And also how to write a custom data provider. Now, it's quite a lot to get through, and I hope we'll get through it. There's one other aspect of Visio Services. It's not really Visio Services, I have to say. It's more about Visio, which I wanted to put in this talk. The original talk I did was about not 2.5 hours, that was too long, an hour and a half. Okay? And the other aspect I did put in there with Visio is actually designing workflows in SharePoint with Visio, which you can do. So you can actually design in SharePoint 2010 a SharePoint workflow. You can basically import that into SharePoint Designer 2010. You can then hook up your workflow, which you've designed in Visio, and deploy that to your site in SharePoint 2010. And it is absolutely awesome. It works an absolute treat. So much easier than before. Makes workflow actually usable and designable without third-party tools. Is absolutely excellent. And you also can do the opposite. You can take a workflow and you can export it into Visio. You can then edit it and then republish it back out. Absolutely fantastic, and it is so easy to do, it's untrue. Really, really easy to do. I'm not saying that I don't work for Microsoft, okay? I've seen it, I've done it myself. I like things simple, and believe you me, it is very, very simple. So let's move on and do some developing with Visio Services. So we're going to have a look at some rendering stuff and data binding stuff. Just a little bit of background. Those XAML, the Silverlight controls, they will all render in IE, Firefox and Safari, and thereby, because it's Safari, it will also render in Chrome. So there's no problem there. It does use Silverlight to render, but if you, for some reason, don't have Silverlight installed, it will render it as a PNG. Not too sure about the transparency aspect. If it does do transparency, I haven't checked on that, then you might have a few problems in IE6. But otherwise, other than that, you should be fine. And there is a JavaScript API, which we'll take a look at in a bit, which allows you to do all sorts of things in the browser with your diagrams. Data refresh features, well, we've already taken a look a little bit at some of the SQL, some of the Excel, and we will actually take a look at building, not from scratch I might say, that'll take a little bit too long, but we will take a look at building a custom data provider so that you can hook into any kind of data source that you fancy to do. So, okay, on with the first real demo. I'd like to say there's coding, but there isn't. There is no coding in this. It's a code-free demo. And that's great, okay, because coding is very expensive and that costs money. I know we all like to do it, but to be honest, it costs money. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at, switch on to my box here. I'm actually using VirtualBox, by the way, as a virtualization platform for laptop. Anyone use VirtualBox here at all? Got a few. If you want a desktop virtualization solution for 64-bit, VirtualBox. I can't believe I'm promoting a Sun product, but what the heck, okay, it's really, really good, very, very performant, okay, and it's free as well. Okay, so we have a diagram here, which I've started to build. This is just a straightforward Visio diagram. There's nothing unusual about it. It's just, you know, I can move it around as I do here, okay. There's nothing about this diagram. Visio gets the ribbon, so if you don't like the ribbon, you're fresh out of luck. You're going to get a ribbon, whether you like it or not. I suppose you can always turn it off. Personally, I like the ribbon. And what we've got here is a very simple diagram, which we're going to then bind to our data. So I'm going to click my Data tab. I'm going to link my data to shapes. I'm going to pick a previously created data connection, which is actually an Office data connection, which is stored in the Data Connections library on my SharePoint site. I'm going to pick this one here, which I've already created, so I'm going to do that one, which is a straight servers one. That is the data connection that provided most of the data binding for the big server diagram I did a little bit earlier. So it's doing all its stuff. As I say, I'll just carry on talking a bit, because I'm sure by the time I finish talking, then it would have actually properly loaded, and there won't be that one horrible pregnant pause whilst we're all waiting for things to happen. And there we go. We get the next box up, which allows us to select the columns which we want to select. And here's my data coming from the database. That's a bit of sample there. I'm actually going to collect all the columns, and I can select the rows I want to select. And there's all my data coming from my database. It's all from the database. And there's see my pings there we've got. Okay, so we've got a few things there. And what I think we'll do is we'll go to next. And what I will do, I'll just start up my little server pinger again, because I want to see if I can get some different figures coming out here. So I'm just going to quickly do that. I won't run it for too long, because as I say, it does tend to bring the VM a little bit to its knees after a while. And finished. Okay, so that's my data there into my external data. Now, there's a few tricky steps, I'll warn you, for data binding in Visio. All right, so you've got to be careful. So I want you to watch very carefully what I'm doing here. So, so here we go. So watch this carefully. All right, do you get that? All right, that's it. We're now data bound. Okay, so that's that one there, and oh, there's that one there. That's done, and oh, that one there is done. Okay, and we're done. That's data bound. Hard, wasn't it? All right. So, but if we zoom in, we can see a few things. We can actually see that this is actually really is data bound, because it's picked up some information. There's my app server. It's a bit piddly, the name, isn't it? It's a bit weak and small. So what I can do is I can actually look at my data graphics. I knew that was going to happen. I hate that when it happens. So how do I do that? Is it Alt, space, and then I've got to move down or something like that. When I move, and I can move that down or something like that. Oh, no. I knew that was going to happen. There we go. Oops. Come on. It should sort itself out in a bit. I'm just trying to get that. Ah, there we go. Okay. So basically we've got our little data graphic here, which is our host name here. We'll get the full screen back up in a second. And I can actually edit this item and pick where I want to go. It's actually got a default position, which I'm going to use at the bottom, but I'm going to just up the font a bit. I'm going to give it, let's give it 20 points, okay, and do that one. And let's raise the label and make that something like 16 points, okay. So I'll do that. So we can click on that, click OK, and oh dear, sorry about that. A bit of finger trouble there. So now we can see that we've actually got slightly bigger writing there. So in fact what I will do is I'll actually show you, here we go again. So there is a way of doing this, and someone showed me once how to get out of this horrible mess. Move, and then, is that right? Use the arrow. Use the arrow keys, is that it? Move there, and then, who's that man? Give him some swag. Okay, there we go. Thank you. I hate it when it happens. So I'm just going to turn that down and put that to 8 points. Click OK. Click Apply. And is that looking any better? Yes, we haven't got any wrapping there, so that's good. So what I'll also do is now we want some traffic lights. I feel you ought to have traffic lights with a server diagram, don't you? I think we should all, yeah? All in favour of traffic lights? Let's have some traffic lights. So we'll actually have a new item. I'm going to create, I'm going to choose a data field. I'm going to pick my ping time, and I'm going to select an icon set, and there's our traffic lights. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll do something like if our value is between 1 and 150, we'll have green. If it's between 151, you thought I was going to think of that, didn't you? And 300, we're going to do that. And then we're going to do, if it's greater than 301, okay, and if it equals, if it's actually less than or equal to 0, we'll just show a little black dot there, okay? Click Apply, and okay, and if we do that, then we can see, hopefully, we've got orange, orange. Oh, we've got 3 oranges this time. It's always a bit of a gamble. We can see there. And we may not want, I know, you know what's going to happen, don't you? Oh. I really, yeah. But I know how to do it now because that chap told me. There we go. So there we go. That's brilliant. There we go. Thank you for that. Saved my life. And if we click OK, I don't want that there. I'm actually going to have it actually at the right edge, and I'm going to have it in the middle and apply it there, and click OK, and that's a bit better. It's like that. So that's our diagram there. That looks pretty okay. I think I like that. So all we need to do now, I had already saved this to the server prior to this session, because it does a few little screens come up and a few little whirring buttons, and I didn't want to bore you with that. So I'm just going to save that, and that will save it back up to the server. And that's our data-driven diagram being processed with the data source link also being sent up to the server as well. We get a few screens like this. Hopefully when you've got a real proper server, it doesn't go on for quite so long as this. But it's actually converting it to that VDW format. Even though it's in read down as VDW, it obviously converts it to straightforward Visio format whilst it's working in Visio, and then converts it back up to the VDW. And if we go back up to our site, just down the bottom here, you can see my live demo here. If I just do a quick F5 refresh, then hopefully we'll see you've got 838 there. It's now 1027. And if I flick to a live demo there, you always get this warning when you title a data source to whether or not you want to enable that data. And we've got that there. And we can actually see that our pings have changed slightly because we've got a red one there now and an orange one there. Okay, so that is now connected to our live data, and hopefully we might be able to see what happens if I actually simulate our failure again by hitting an F in our little window there. We've got our F coming through. I think we did, hopefully. And if we actually do a refresh there, I don't know if one of these is going to fail. Yes, see the black things have gone black now, it's failed. I'll pick 3 which is going to fail. All right. How long did that take? Thank you. That took about 5 minutes. Okay? The biggest time you spend, to be honest, is making a diagram look nice. Right? It really is that. It really is as hard as that. Okay? So that's really good. So I must turn that pinger off, otherwise it really will destroy the poor old server. So let's do a quick quit there, hopefully. Thank you. That's good. That's done that. So that's how to produce a data-driven diagram in Visio. Fairly straightforward, as hopefully you'll agree. So let's move on to the next one and take a look at the Visio Services JavaScript API. And again, this is actually fairly straightforward. If you haven't worked with JavaScript before, then possibly you might find a few little weird things. But if you just think everything is asynchronous, everything is asynchronous. Okay, when you work with Silverlight, everything is asynchronous. So everything tends to get event-driven. Right? You're always just doing stuff by events. So you're always declaring event handlers all over the place. And it's not always the nicest thing for debugging, but it's the way of the world, and it's not going to change at the moment unless we make the whole internet synchronous, which isn't very likely. So we're stuck with that. So you have to learn a little bit about async, but it's all very straightforward. There's nothing particularly frightening about it. Okay. So how does it work? Well, when you actually place a Visio Services web part onto the page, you automatically get a whole bunch of resources downloaded with that page, such that it brings down all the JavaScript you need to work with your Visio Services web parts. And all you have to do is actually just write your JavaScript code. And it doesn't have to be between web parts. You can just work on a single web part if you want. You can do quite fancy things. I'm going to do a very simple demonstration in a minute where I've been basically just resize and set the zoom of a Visio Services web part, and also how to link those two web parts together through some kind of clicking. But you can actually inject Silverlight XAML into your into your Visio web parts. So you can actually live inject Silverlight XAML into there, so you can actually display your own custom images inside your Silverlight control. So if you want to overlay images or overlay data, you can do that just through the JavaScript API. You have to. It's fairly straightforward. To be honest, it's easiest if you just follow a simple pattern of how to write this JavaScript. It's very, very straightforward. And the first thing you do is you declare a couple of variables. Visio. I don't know why VWA. I copied this code from the guys who did the session at Vegas. Okay, I'll fess up again. All right. I have changed it a little bit. Okay, I changed it because I didn't pinch their diagram, but I did pinch the code. They're very kind to send it to me. And you can see it's a bit Silverlight-ish because you've got sys.application. Anyone's worked with Silverlight, that should ring some Silverlight bells. And basically add load, so basically on application load. What does that mean? Well, basically it means that once the Silverlight, has loaded, then it would basically, when your Silverlight web part, so your Silverlight, your Visio Services web part, which is in Silverlight, your Visio Service, when it is loaded, it will fire this event. Okay, it will fire this event. And then once it's the Visio Services web part has been loaded, okay, it's then going to load your Visio Services diagram into your web part. And you can just pick the web part ID, and you pick a handler, say add handler. In this case, there's several handlers you can use, several events you can use. I'll pick this one in this example is diagram complete. And when the diagram is complete, then it goes and runs this code, and that's where you put your stuff. Okay, so the top stuff's all standard. All right, that stuff, it's standard if you want to work with more web parts, you've got to put more entries in there, and then that's what you get. Now, the active page is not your ASP page. Don't get confused there, okay? That's your page within your Visio Services diagram. All right? So nice and straightforward there. So let's have a little bit of a demo, see what's going on here. And this, again, is reasonably straightforward. And we'll just flick to our site here. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. I wonder where I was. Okay, so let's go back to our sales diagram and take a look here. And as you can see, it is a beautiful thing. Do you not agree? Okay, it is very nice. It's all laid out lovely, and it looks wonderful. And that's purely done by a sleight of hand. Okay, because if I flick this screen into edit mode, then what we will find is that there are a number of web parts here. And there are actually a number of, there's a hidden web part as well. Well, not really hidden, it just doesn't show anything live, right? And that is this one here, this little slither up here, which is actually a content editor web part. And all I've put in there is I'll put a little bit of JavaScript in there, a JavaScript tag. Content editor web parts are great for cross-site scripting attacks. I mean, no, I didn't say that, okay, but they are. All right, so you can put JavaScript in there, you can do what you like, and in this case, it serves my purpose. And if you look here, I've actually got a little JavaScript file I've put in there, and it's just basically a script tag and then some JavaScript in there. I'm just going to knock out the 2 there, because there's another JavaScript file I've uploaded that's got absolutely nothing in it, right, other than the script tag, and it's got a function that says return. So it's actually very straightforward. And if I actually then I've clicked OK and apply, and doing all that, and if I stop editing, then we haven't got a problem there. That's a shame. Maybe we should have a problem. Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. We'll go back and do that again. You can't have all demos work. They've all been pristine so far. But you actually want it to not look nice, and when you don't want it to look nice, it fails on you. Okay, so if we actually just go back and edit the web part, I'll use this as a slight mishap here as a teaching progress, teaching point. You can actually I've disabled a zoom and a pan. Okay, so you've got all these options here, all right, which I can play around with, and I'm actually just going to re-enable the zoom and the pan, because I actually wanted to show you what it should have looked like when I took the JavaScript out. Instead, it actually remembered where it was. But I can just do that, and I can fiddle around with the zoom and do all that, and I'm going to stick it over there. All right, and it probably, hopefully, will end up back over there. All right, and then when I actually go back to my page and stop editing, then yes, indeed, it actually does, in fact, end up over there. Bit of extreme example. But I actually want it to be up the top, and I could do all this, and I could do a bit of zooming and that, like, if I want to, and think, oh, I'll get out of that. But what you don't want is your MD or your sales director doing that, do you? So, oh, I can't get my thing, and you scroll around there. You want to fix it, okay? You want to lay it out nice, right, so they can just see it. So that's all that my little bit of JavaScript does. So if I flick it back to there and put my proper JavaScript back in, remember my little content, my little cross-site scripting attack up here. Do a bit of 2 there, click OK, and we'll actually find, hopefully, that indeed our page comes back exactly as it should do, perfectly aligned there. All right. So how does that work? All right, what have I got to do? So, well, if we take a look at our JavaScript here, that's my blank JavaScript. That's when it didn't work. All right. Now it's when it does work. Here we go. So I've got my controls at the top here. I notice I've declared a couple of VWA controls and a couple of pages. I only need the one page in this case. There's my sys actually on load. Here's my application on load, which is this event here. I'm picking up 2 web parts. Okay, VWA control is the top one. VWA control 2 is the bottom right-hand one. I'm picking up 2 events, one from each of the web parts. I'm picking up a shape selected from the top one. So when I click on the top one, okay, that's going to fire that event. So it's all a bit hard-coded. You can make this much slicker if you want, okay, but it was a bit late last night and I was getting a bit desperate. So I thought I'd just hard-code it, okay. I'm fessing up, here it's hard-coded right in front of you. Right, but in terms of diagram 1, this sets the zoom. So I've got a method here called set zoom. So I set the zoom to 79. I set the position. Bit of a funny position. 0, 0 is kind of up there, such that the center of the diagram is like up in the top left-hand corner, right? And then you've got to sort of wiggle it around and go down like that. I'm sure it's a nice, easy way of doing it. I just fiddle around a bit, but it'd be probably quite easy to put a couple of text boxes on your page and just keep typing numbers in there, keep refreshing until you get it coming right. It should be easy. Didn't have time last night, but there we go. So basically, when diagram 2 is complete, then if the URL, I can get the diagram URL, I can find out what the diagram URL is. And if it's basically equal to North America, then do that. If it's equal to Europe, do that. If it's equal to Pacific, do that. It happens to be, I think, all exactly the same, but it might not be. All right, depending on how your diagram is laid out. And when you actually click the shape, okay, you get selected shape, and then what you can do is you can pick up your protocol, your location, and you can get shape data. All right, what's all this malarkey here? And you're thinking 14, blah, 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 blah. Well, you have to know a little bit about your shape data and to do that. Okay, so if you're not aware that in Visio, right, you can actually have data associated with a shape, and indeed in this one, I've got a URL. Okay, this URL is used for different purposes. This one is one I'm actually using. Okay, and I'm actually getting that value. It's stored in an array. I'm just getting out using the JavaScript, getting it out of the shape data, and then using it to render, picking which shape I actually want to display. Okay, so basically when I click, so if I go back to my diagram and I click my diagram, that's basically picking up that on change selected. It's picked up the URL from the data stored within this shape here. Okay, it's telling me that I need to go and get that diagram, and when I click on that one, it tells me I need to go and get the other diagram. Okay, fairly straightforward. It's not the only way to link diagrams. You can do it through webpack connections, but I wanted to show the JavaScript aspect on this particular situation. Okay, so that's that one there. Okay, so let's move on. And in the last 20 minutes, what we're going to be talking about is going to look at the custom data providers. And here we're going to go back to the slides again a little bit and take a look at a little bit at how the custom data provider model works. So we have our creator, our SharePoint Visio Services sitting there in the middle, and we've got our consumer. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky if you want to do custom data providers. You have to, do you remember a few years ago we had a thing called VBA? Remember that? In Office? Used to write VBA? Who started out in their careers writing VBA? Yeah, fess up. Be proud. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Okay, we can all get over it, but no, it's still there. You know, it's still there. VBA still exists. You know, Office products by natively don't know what .NET is. I mean, I know that's unbelievable, but they don't actually know what .NET is. They do understand what VBA is, though. And VBA knows nothing about ADO.NET datasets. Okay, you have to tell it about ADO classic record sets. Remember those. So, but fear not, you can still write .NET code, okay, to do this. But what you have to do is it's like you have to prime your diagram using classic ADO record set. That's what you have to do, because it only recognizes the shape of the data using a classic ADO record set. So you've got to tell it what columns and what rows to use using a classic ADO record set schema. It doesn't matter what data is in there. It is irrelevant what data is in there. You can put any old nonsense. It just has to give it the shape of the data. All right? So once we've done that, we then have to think about when we open up our diagram, we actually want some proper data to come out. We don't want our rubbishy ADO classic primer data to come out. We actually want our proper data to come out, and that is gained by connecting to a custom data provider. The custom data provider is written in .NET. You can write it whatever language you like in .NET, and you put it in the global assembly cache. This has implications when you're talking about sandbox solutions with 2010. You have to think along those lines. That's another subject entirely. We're not going to cover that there, but there is an implication there. Once you've done your data binding, we saw how to do that a bit earlier. We will go and I'll show you the differences. What we had a little extra step we have to do for these custom data binders. Then we upload to VDW and onto our server again. Our consumer again, just as always, just requests the data, and then it uses this asynchronous model again, asynchronous data model again, because it's the Visio Services web part calling out into our server, into our custom data source to go and get the data. So it uses, again, an asynchronous data model. And then, again, the diagram is refreshed and we see our data. And we saw an example of this in our floor plan. Okay, when it went from orange to red, I just changed the XML file and it changed the data. That's using exactly what's going on here in this diagram. All right, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit more. Okay, so we'll look at this in the real thing and also put it on the slide. All right, so remember, when you're doing this, you just prime your diagram using a classic ADO record set. You want to get the schema for it, I can send it to you. Good luck to finding information on the internet, all right, because it's not a lot of it out there left. I'm sure some of those sites have been taken down. Right, they are out and about, but actually getting some detailed information on the actual schemas required can be a little bit tricky. But it's out there. The old Google groups have still got a lot of stuff on there. You won't find much on Bing, unfortunately, on that one. Okay, so we have two lines which we have to call. One is we have this document will refer to this little bit of code here is running a little visual VBA app within your Visio diagram. This code does not run on the Visio services. It only runs in your diagram whilst you're writing it, okay? Because it basically hooks up your diagram to the correct data source. The code does not go with the diagram and run on the server, so there's no implications like that. It's not what's happening here. This is just running your Visio whilst you're generating your diagram, and this is what connects your diagram to its data source, and then off it goes merrily. So it only runs in Visio on the actual client, not on Visio services or in the browser. So you have a little element there called this document, which refers to the actual Visio document, data record sets, add from XML, and a string in the ADO record set XML format. So basically a classic ADO schema XML document, and then just a name for the data set, just like having in ADO.NET, just any old name. So, and then you have this thing called a command string. Now, the example I've done is a very simple one. As I say, I pinched it from the guys in Vegas, and all it does is it gets a file name and reads what's in the XML file. So this command string is really like you would have a command string, or it's really like a connection string. You know, you have data source equals, initial catalog equals. That's what this is, okay? This is basically telling the data where to get its data from and how to go and get it, okay? And there's two bits of information you need. You need the data module. That's the thing that you have to write in .NET and you put in the GAC. So that's the full name there. And then also whatever other information that you want to put in there. Doesn't have to be just doesn't have to be file, can be any old thing, can be bananas or whatever you like, okay? It can be whatever you want, you put it in there. In this case, I'm just putting a file, I'm giving it an absolute location of where my file is. It could be a web service reference, it could be an Oracle, well, I said an Oracle connection anyway, otherwise, but any other thing you might fancy doing, okay? All right, so as I say, okay, this schema, this line sets up the schema using the classic ADO schema record set. That is what primes the shape of the data. All right, and oh, sorry, no, wrong way. And then this one here is what connects your diagram to the refresh. That's what connects you to your live data. That's actually what fills your diagram with data. Okay. Okay, so we'll quickly go and do a quick look at this demo of how to do this. And indeed, we've got our floor plan here. So that's our diagram here, which we saw earlier, and this is my data here, which has already been joined. Okay, notice everything's 22, 22, 22. Okay, and that's all comes from this marvelous piece of document here. Okay, that's all coming from there. All right, notice 22, 20. It's all nonsense stuff. I just put it in there. It doesn't matter what that data is. It can be all zeros, as long as the shape of the data is reflected in what you're ultimately going to refresh to. And what I'm going to refresh to is this. This is my live data. This is what I want. This is where I'm getting my actual populating my data from my diagram. Okay, we saw it. I changed this 22 to 23 or whatever, put it back to 22. Right, that is the data I changed earlier to get the swap in colour on the diagram. Okay, what's the difference between? Well, not a lot really, to be honest. It's a slightly obscure naming here. I could have made it better. All right. But basically everything is attribute orientated in this XML schema, and here in the data set, this is just a classic. This is just a standard ADO.NET data set XML format. Okay, and everything is element based. That's about the only difference. Classic attribute .NET is element based. So if we go back to our diagram here, and we open up our developer tab, you have to go to additional options to get the developer tab to come out. So you go down to your view your go back to your where is it? You know, it's basically more commands. Do your options there, and you get your developer tab coming up. If you look at Visual Basic, here's our little bit of code we have to run. Okay, gosh, does this bring back memories? Okay, remember that hash one? Who remembers that? Who remembers doing hash one? Of course, we all do, yeah. Okay, so here we are. So I'm closing it just in case, you know, I remember what it was like with opening and closing, all that malarkey. So I'll go and get my file schema. All right, it's my floor plan schema here. And I'll go and get the input file. and I just clear down any existing record sets and rejoin it. And here's my 2 lines I had on the slide. So I go and get my string input, and that's the content of this file here. Okay, so that's that content of that file there. And then we do our binding to our command string here, which goes to our custom data provider. And here we go, and here's my file equals, and that's our actual live data. So this primes it, gives us this shape here. All right, that gives us the shape here. That's what gives us this data here. And then I can literally just do my drag and drop, okay, to my rooms there, and that gives us the data there. Once I've done that, then we're ready to go. So maybe we just have a very brief look at the code itself. None of it's particularly scary. You basically have to inherit from the following types: add-on data handler, and you need an async result interface, which you implement. Everything's async, remember. I'm not going to go through all the async stuff, okay? It's all boilerplate code. You don't have to worry about that. Again, stick to a good pattern on this. Just worry about, the initial, the async stuff is all just boilerplate code. We start out a thread in our async stuff, and we start a thread task. All right? That's all we're doing here. So the meat and potatoes is actually here. And so we have a thread task, and what we're doing here is we're getting our file out of our query string. That's not the ASP in the browser query string. That is actually your command string. That is your provider string, which we saw earlier. Okay, just to make sure we're quite happy what that is. That is this string here at the bottom, this command string. I don't know why I didn't call it command string in the other place, because it could get a bit confusing otherwise, but basically that's where we are. That is the query, that is the command string, okay? And all we're doing here is we're just digging out the file name, file equals and dig out the file name, and then effectively just plopping that straight into a data set, and then the data set is what gets returned by the async result, okay? And that's what then the diagram is then bound to, and that's what then the data it actually shows, okay? So that's the really how to actually do a custom data provider. It is fairly straightforward. I'll get the right one. The trickiest thing, okay, to be honest, is just getting this shape of the data set up. If you want to do different data types like time, you can make. I mean, who likes working with dates? None of us. Okay, and you can imagine it's just another awkward date format you've got to get your head around. So that is a little bit tricky sometimes. All right. But it's just basically it's just numbers, Boolean, string, however you want to show your data, all right? And otherwise it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so pretty much in summary then, we've had a look at Visio Services, and just to reiterate that you need the Enterprise CAL at the moment to enjoy Visio Services. But if you have the Enterprise CAL, then it allows you to build dynamic data-driven diagrams which you can deploy onto the web, okay, in Silverlight or in PNG, in all glorious Technicolor, and you don't even have to write any XAML. Okay, you don't have to get Blend out, don't have to get Notepad out. Okay, you can just do your diagram and it goes up in XAML. It provides an enterprise diagramming capability. Okay, it's a service application, so it's available across the whole of the farm. And it's a big good addition to business intelligence. Originally, we're pretty much a business intelligence house, really, in terms of we use SharePoint as our platform for deploying business intelligence. And this is, we're really excited about this because it's, you have graphs. We've done graphs, we've done mapping, right? Blatant self-promotion. I'm doing a Silverlight dashboard of mapping and Bing Maps this afternoon, last session in the community track, if anyone's interested. Show you how to put it all together with analysis services and a whole lot. But this is something else we want to add to our mix. It provides another form of showing data in a visual way which is impactful, and people can immediately see what is going on with their data. And you can really pretty much connect to any type of data, really. Through that custom data provider. Yes, it's probably a little bit fiddly. You have to think about authentication. That's the other thing I didn't do there, because it's just basically I just stuffed it in my app folder on my SharePoint. Let's just ignore the problem for starters, okay? But you have to think about your authentication aspects in that. because obviously the app pool is going to be making a call out to your data provider, so you've got to think on those terms. So you've got options to you've got Kerberos, you've got the secure credential store in SharePoint 2010. There's a whole bunch of other stuff you can do. I'm not saying that's going to be plain sailing, but the capability is there, basically. The capability is there. And that, I've got about 5 minutes left to take any questions from you guys. I hope you've enjoyed the session. I hope it's opened your eyes a little bit to something a little bit different in SharePoint 2010. Not very well advertised, I don't think. I think it should be more advertised, and that's one of my aims in life over the next few months, to really try and get people excited about Visio Services. Okay, thank you. No questions. Free to go. Oh, I've got a gentleman down there.
When you were that bit of JavaScript code that is calling functions like get, shape, data, and all that, are those Visio functions or Silverlight functions that you're calling?
Okay, so the question was the JavaScript methods I was calling, like set zoom and such like. Are they Visio functions or .NET functions? It's actually a JavaScript API. I don't know how it works under the hood. I guess it's some kind of web service call back to the server or whatever. But there's actually quite a large JavaScript file which gets loaded up, which has all of that. You can, in fact, you can actually load that into your Visual Studio to get some IntelliSense on it. Good luck with that. Okay, but I've got it working from time to time. But it is basically a full JavaScript API. Quite how it works all under the hood, I'm not terribly sure. Okay, but it's basically cool. I think it just calls into the Silverlight. The Silverlight probably exposes a number of properties which are available to there's a thing called the HTML bridge. I covered that a little bit this afternoon. More blatant self-promotion. So there's an HTML bridge which allows certain scriptable objects to be available in Silverlight. I guess that they do it that way. Okay, does that answer the question?
I'm sure it's well done.
Yeah. Good luck with that as well. Okay. Dana.
About the AI stuff, when you connect a cube to your Visio and you want to drill down and you want to slice the dice, is it also available in the web client?
So the question was, can you hook up an analysis services cube to a Visio diagram and drill down and do slice and dice? Really, not really. It's a very good question, actually, and I'm glad you brought it out because I meant to cover it in the session, so thank you for that. This is great, okay, Visio Services, but it's really geared more to data which probably doesn't change quite so quickly or doesn't change shape quite so quickly, okay? You'd be better off in that situation to use something like Excel services or ProClarity or something like that, if that's still around, if Microsoft haven't completely kidnapped and murdered it. But basically, this is good for data for which you know isn't going to change. Not the value's not going to change. That's not what I'm saying. The value can change often as it like, but the shape of the data doesn't change too often. Okay, you don't want to keep redeploying those Visio diagrams every time. One of the things I've asked for the next version is to have some kind of repeater control. So you could actually add in some repeating. So you like put one server on there, and then you bind it to a list of servers, and it gets to draw it out itself rather than having to bind to each row. I mean, that would be dead cool, but that would probably be vNext. So thanks for that. Thanks for the question. Yeah.
You said that it prompts you for enabling the connection when it's connected to the data.
Yes.
Can you get rid of that prompt by signing Visio to
It's not so much. It doesn't prompt you every time. It just prompts you in your session. Now, it's a good question. I don't actually know the full answer to whether you can get rid of it totally. You do have to declare, like my custom data provider there, one step I didn't show was you have to actually register that custom data provider in central administration so that you actually are allowed to connect to the source. And even though I did that, I still got the prompt coming up. So I guess, for as well, I don't know. I've always got the prompt the first time I've gone through to any source. So the first time somebody goes to that, I guess they're going to get a prompt. I may be wrong on that, so I can find out. If you ping me an email, and I'll try and find out for you. Okay. Okay. Oh, we've got a question right at the back.
Can you use the SharePoint list and the source?
I think you can do it, but you have to. I don't know the way you're connecting directly. Just trying to think now. Actually, just quickly go in there. I've only tried it by actually doing the linking via the list. If we actually look at the data here and then link to shape today, so yes, you can link to a SharePoint Foundation list directly as a data source. Thanks for the question. Okay. I haven't done that. I should have done that, shouldn't I? Really, it should be in one of the demos, really. So. Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate your time. Thank you.